Hello, welcome back. We're going to continue learning about checked exceptions and these try-catch blocks because there are a couple more concepts that need to be learned here. We added try-catch blocks, we added multiple catch blocks, right? And we also learned that the superclass should be um, coded after the subclass. Otherwise, if the superclass catch block is before the subclass, right, the superclass will catch any of the child class exceptions as well because of polymorphism, and we don't want that happening. Now, let's say we have a message that you want to display here, right? System.out.println completed, completed reading the file, right? We know that the test.txt doesn't exist, right? So we're gonna have throw exception right here. Let's try to quickly run it again. So the exception was thrown, caught here, this message was displayed, and done was displayed, right? Now this never executed because as soon as the exception happens, the control will go to the catch blocks and then proceed from there, right? But what if we have a statement here that we always want to execute, regardless of whether there is an exception or not? If the code is here, it is never going to happen, right? So what we want is to put this code in a place where it will execute regardless of whether an exception was thrown or the code was running fine. To do that, there is a block called finally. So after you define all the catch blocks, you'll say finally, and then use your curly braces and put your statement here. Now let's put it here, save it. Now let's run it. As you can see, we threw the exception, we caught it here, but we also displayed this message and then continued, right? Now, if we were to define this files here, let's go ahead and create that file, new file. So we want to prevent that exception from being thrown. Text.txt, finish, right? I'm gonna some text abcde. Now let's try to run it to see if you're able to read that file successfully, right? There you go. So there was no exception thrown here. We were able to instantiate a reader, and then we were able to read the line from the file, which is abcde, and print it, which means there was no exception. So the catch blocks never executed, but the finally block did get executed. All right, we got this message displayed. So as you can see, the finally block always runs, right? What do you want to do with the finally block normally? Normally, you would want to use it to do any cleanup. We try to display a message here, but in this example, we have a reader that we open, right? We have to close it. We can obviously say reader dot close, right? Now let's say if this code executes and then this read line, which throws an IO exception, right? Let's say this throws an exception. At this point, we have the reader opened, but not closed at all, right? If we were to throw an exception here, this close operation will never happen, right? That is not a good thing. That's what we call leaks in Java. So we don't want any of these memory or any type of leak happening. If you are opening a connection, you need to close them, right? You need to close it. So instead of putting it here, if you put it somewhere like here, obviously the close also throws an exception, which we need to catch here, right? Reader cannot be resolved because we have to define the reader outside the block. Because if you say buffered reader here, it's visible only in this block. So Java doesn't know what this means. So we can put it here equals null because we need to initialize it to something, right? And then we don't have to define it again here. And here we want to say if reader not equals null because we don't want to run it if we did not even open the reader, right? So we want to make sure it's not null. And we need to put a try catch for this also. So run with try catch, and we don't need to do anything because this is the exception. This is an example of an exception block that doesn't do anything because when we try to um, let me finish this formatting, right? So this block is empty. This block is empty because we are trying to close the reader. The only reason where this exception can happen is the reader was never opened to begin with, which means the code could have failed here, right? Never even got here. So we don't have a reader open. So we don't, I mean, we don't, we're not expecting execution here at all, right? Or we don't want to handle anything because there's nothing to be done. So you could it's perfectly okay to define empty blocks if you know that there is nothing that needs to be done, right? Now let's go ahead and run it after we fix the error here. So this is the try catch. Obviously, for the if block, there is a curly brace missing. Now let's try to run it. Yep, we got the same thing. ABCDE completed reading the file, and then we successfully closed it and then completed the program, right? So a finite block is where you put some statements that you know that they have to execute, right? Regardless of what happens. Finally is a very important block. If you write any type of connection opening or anything that you do here that you know you have to clean up, it is very important to put it in the finally block to make sure it runs always. So that's finally statement. There's one more concept that we need to learn here, which is the throws. We're going to learn that in the next video. But at this point, I hope you can realize why finally should be used or the importance of it. I would really encourage you to kind of like play with it. You can try to read another file, see what happens and stuff like that. But that's basically it. That's basically finally block. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.